Okay, now we are recording. Hello everyone. Thanks to stay here. Welcome to our Cosmos seminar of September 26th. Today we have Luis Felipe Demetrio from Universidad Estadual de Londrina with his work called Predictions from a Pre-Big Bang Quantum Bounce. So you can start, Luis, and thank you for your seminar.
Okay, go back. So first, thanks for everyone that came to watch and stuff. So my name is Felipe Demetro, and I'm a PhD student at the Universidade Estadual de Londrina. My advisor is Professor Sandro Dias Pinto Vitente. And today I'll talk about predictions from pre-Big Bang quantum bouncing models. So the idea was as follows. Let me give some motivations before discussing this work. This whole discussion is set in the context of the quite recent discovery that one can use vacuum fluctuations to describe the origin, the formation of the large-scale structure for our universe, and describe the CMB spectrum. This is very recent. It was implemented by Mukhanov and Chibisov and Rock in the 80s. And the idea is that one considers a usual Friedmann-Lemaitre-Robertson-Walker metric with small quantum perturbations, and this leads to predictions for the cosmic microwave background radiation spectrum. But in order to amplify these very small vacuum fluctuations, which are of quantum mechanical nature, one needs a mechanism to do so, which is usually considered in the context of inflation. And inflation has been widely used to describe the CMB, and it also has some nice theoretical features in the sense that it alleviates an initial conditions problems of the lambda CDM model. Here I'm talking about the horizon problem, the flatness problem, and the origin of cosmological perturbations problem. But it does not solve what I consider to be, let's say, the most singular problem, which is the singularity problem. It does not even address the singularity problem. So in this setting, one may also consider what we call bouncing models, where the idea is that one considers a phase of contraction before the Big Bang and tries to derive predictions from the CMB spectrum, like inflation does, but focusing on solving the singularity problem. That's the idea. And there are also some other features that the inflationary paradigm does not solve completely. For instance, the objective, let's say, of inflation would be to convert general initial conditions on the geometry to the special initial conditions of the CMB that we observe. For instance, one would need to show that the anisotropy and the special curvature scale are diluted by inflation, but this is non-trivial. This is actually achieved at background level because when one considers the shear or the curvature in the background Friedmann equations, one can see directly that an inflationary phase dilutes both of them. But this is not the case at the perturbative level. Why? Because one needs to define appropriate vacuum states to set the initial conditions of the cosmological perturbations for curved special sessions or anisotropic models. Okay, so this is related to the definition of a vacuum state. Here are some references if you are interested. And other open problems include the Trans-Planckian frequencies problem, where some frequencies have energy scales which are Trans-Planckian, and they are observable in the CMB. This is an open discussion in inflationary models. There is also the quantum to classical transition problem, where perturbations start in a quantum mechanical way, but they need to transition to the classical universe that we observe. And they yet know details of the rewritten phase. So I just listed some open problems of the inflationary paradigm. When one considers bouncing models, most of these problems do not occur. Of course, the bouncing paradigm has other problems, but this is just, let's say, a motivation that one can consider alternative mechanisms. And of course, in the end, since in inflation we still have a singularity, probably the final model, let's say, of primordial cosmology would be something like a combination of the two. Probably a mechanism to generate a bounce to remove the singularity, but one could also have an inflationary phase. These are all open problems, let's say. Anyway, so bouncing models are competitive padding, and they focus on solving the singularity problem. That's the idea. So these are just the introduction and motivations, but let's now go to the plan of this talk. So I'll first discuss bounces in canonical quantum gravity, the canonical consideration of general relativity. This is achieved using the so-called Wheeler-DeWitt equation. And then I will discuss a, let's say, more realistic model, which is the two-fluid model that we have been working with. I will also discuss the single-fluid models, but they are sort of already falsified. I will then discuss what we call the Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization technique to set initial conditions in this kind of bouncing models, the vacuum state. I will present an outline of the technique and show how it defines a set of initial conditions which are equivalent to a vacuum state and to a generalization of the WKB approximation for cosmological perturbations. I will then conclude with predictions from the more realistic model, which is the two-fluid model, in particular the evolution of the perturbative modes, the adiabatic and entropy primordial power spectrum that sets the initial conditions for the CMB. And this is it. I take some water. So, the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, what is it? The idea is very simple. It refers to the Schrödinger equation applied to the gravitational field. The idea goes as follows. When we have a Lagrangian or an action, one can always perform a Legendre transform to go from the Lagrangian to the Hamiltonian. And when you have the Hamiltonian of your theory, you promote your variables to operators, and you can write a Schrödinger equation, like we had learned in the undergraduate courses. But in general relativity, we have the Einstein-Hilbert action. So we can perform a Legendre transform and then use canonical quantization to set a Schrödinger equation for the Einstein-Hilbert action. It also had a more poetic name, let's say the Einstein-Schrödinger equation, which was the original name, but people changed it to Wheeler-DeWitt equation later. It is very simple, let's say. It is given by the equation 1. The Hamiltonian of general relativity is always 0 due to some constraints on the choice of time. But if you open the definition of the super Hamiltonian, it is given by this very complicated structure, as in equation 2, where you see that we have some functional derivatives and some very nonlinear operators, which are the square root of 8. 8 is the special metric on the special sections, and the Ricci scalar operator, which is of second order in the metric and its derivatives. So the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, in the general case, is a very, very complicated functional differential equation, and it is non-trivial to use it for quantum gravity in general. So we need to assume some simplifying assumptions to make predictions. And I would like to point out that it is a conservative approach to perform a sort of effective canonical quantization of gravity, in the sense that one is only using quantization techniques that are already known, but for the gravitational field. But it, of course, has an yet unknown domain of validity. It certainly does not describe the complete quantum gravity, but the hope is that it captures some information of quantum effects in gravity. That's the idea. Here I would like to point out that it is very common when I discuss this quantization approach that people ask if the super Hamiltonian, etc., is related to supersymmetry. No, the super here comes from superspace, which is the space of all possible geometries in general relativity. So it is not supersymmetry. Okay, so the Wheeler-DeWitt equation in the general case is a monster. We need to assume some simplifying assumptions to derive predictions. So what are we going to do? First, instead of quantizing every possible metric, we are going to assume what we call a minus superspace approximation. What is this? we are going to quantize only metrics with certain symmetries, in particular, homogeneous and isotropic metrics, like we already do in cosmology. This is due to the fact that the functional derivatives in the Wheeler-DeWitt equation will simplify to partial derivatives. So it will become a usual Schrodinger equation. We also need to set a time variable to perform the evolution of our system, because the Hamiltonian of general relativity is always zero. To do so, we are going to assume an internal clock of the system. So we are going to identify a matter degree of freedom to set as time and use it to evolve our system. Finally, since we are quantizing the geometry, we are discussing the wave function of the universe. And this is non-trivial to interpret and make predictions because we only have one universe. When we have a wave function, we need an ensemble of systems described by that wave function. And when we perform experiments on this ensemble, that we extract the predictions. But since we only have one universe, this is non-trivial to do so. So to extract predictions from this wave function, we are going to assume what we call the de Broglie interpretation, which is just an interpretation of quantum mechanics to extract information from the wave function. How do you do this? This is sort of like a trajectory or a conal approach to the wave function. You can parameterize it like in equation 3 with an amplitude and a phase, and you define that the momenta of the trajectories, the so-called Bohmian trajectories, are given by the derivatives of the phase. So using these, one can extract trajectories from a wave function that are deterministic, but that encapsulate the quantum effects of this quantization process. This is going to become a bit more clear with the implementation. So we're only going to assume a model with one single barotropic fluid on a flat FLRW metric. The Hamiltonian in this case is very simple. It has a gravitational term and a matter term. The total Hamiltonian is then quadratic in the momenta of the scale factor, which is the only relevant degree of freedom of the Friedmann mathematical Bergson-Walker metric, and is linear on that matter variable, the pi t, which we can set as a time variable. So we now perform canonical quantization. We set the matter variable, which is linear in the Hamiltonian, as a clock variable, and the momenta of the scale factor is just a standard of moment of a canonical coordinate. And this is very, very interesting because you see that after performing all these simplifications, we got a Schrodinger equation, which describes the wave function of the universe, the wave function of the scale factor, but it is essentially a free particle Schrodinger equation. It is very, very simple. So we know how to solve this. We can obtain a wave function and etc. and extract predictions. So after applying the trajectory approach of the de Broglie interpretation, we can derive a deterministic evolution for the scale factor, which is given by equation 8. There's a typo here that this capital T should read small t, which is time. So this is the scale factor as a function of time. For large T, one recovers a classical Big Bang expansion, but one can see that when T equals 0, the scale factor has this minimum value and it does not have a singularity. And when one extracts the evolution of the perturbations, of curvature perturbations on this model, one obtains a power law, primordial power spectrum, but with the spectral index being given by this expression in terms of the W, which is the equation of state parameter of the barotropic fluid. But this only gives the correct spectrum, which is with NS a bit smaller than 1, if the W is negative and much smaller than. But this is a problem because this means that this model with a single barotropic fluid needs some fine-tuning to describe the primordial power spectrum of the CMB. It needs a very, very small and negative W, which is not satisfied by matter that we know. So this is a problem for the single fluid model to describe the primordial power spectrum, but actually I would like to make the case that this is actually a nice feature of this prescription. Why? Because I just described quantum gravitational model based on this canonical quantization that made a prediction for the primordial power spectrum, which is wrong. So I can discard this model. And this is very good because we are not able to probe quantum gravitational scales here on Earth. So the fact that we can extract some predictions, some observables, and say that these classes of models are wrong is very, very interesting because we are concerning high energy physics in this setting. Okay, so just to have a plot, this is the scale factor for radiation-dominated bounds that I just showed. Here one has a classical contracting phase. Then, when the scale factor is very, very small, the quantum effects start to take action, and one removes the primordial singularity to obtain a bounce, which is followed by a classical Big Bang evolution. This is the idea. And we describe the evolution of the primordial perturbations by setting a vacuum state here in the past and evolving it to derive the spectrum of perturbations here in the expanding phase. So now I would like to move to the more complete two-fluid model. This was just a warm-up, but I would like to ask if you have any questions up until now, just to see if you understood the idea of the model and the prescription and so on. Do you have any questions or comments up until now or not?
No, not me.
One, then I'll continue. So we're going to perform the same process, but with a more complete model with two fluids. We're going to consider dust with W very, very small, and radiation with W equals 1/3 on a flat Friedmann Lemaitre Robertson Walker metric. The dust-like fluid is essentially dark matter, and we're considering this because the single fluid model is just an approximation. We know that the real universe has more fluids. It has at least dust, radiation, and dark energy, but we're not considering dark energy yet. So we make the same process. If you write the Hamiltonian of the gravitational field coupled to these two fluids, you obtain equation 10, which has three terms. It has a term that is quadratic in the momenta related to the scale factor, the gravitational degree of freedom, and two terms which are linear on the matter variables of each fluid. We now perform canonical quantization by promoting these momenta to operators and obtain a two-fluid Wheeler-DeWitt equation. This is a bit more complicated than the previous case, but one can also solve this equation, obtain a wave function, and then extract trajectories from this wave function and evolve. So after
Sorry,
performing this,
Luis, I have a question. In the previous equation 11, here is also T is the time. Should be not capital T, normal T, or this T has an interpretation?
I see. It should it is a type. It should be small t from time.
Yeah,
Yes, it
perfect,
is a type.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, nice, thanks. So after performing this, we can extract predictions from this set. So first, after obtaining the wave function and etc., which is a bit technical that I don't want to delve into the details, one also obtains a non-singular scale factor, which is very good because, again, we do not have a singularity in this model, which was our initial objective. And after perturbing the metric by setting small perturbations on the Friedmann-Lemaitre-Robertson-Walker metric, and expanding the action up to second order in these perturbations, one obtains a perturbative Hamiltonian. Here we have two canonical degrees of freedom. One is the zeta, the other is the S. The zeta is the adiabatic mode, and the S is called the entropy mode. So we see that the Hamiltonian is quadratic on these two modes, and they are coupled. They are coupled through the momenta by this epsilon coupling. And it is this coupling that makes everything complicated to calculating this model. Let me explain. Oh, suppose it. Okay, yeah. So the problem is that we have coupled perturbations. And when we study the evolution of this system, we are going to see that this is going to be a problem. But in the end, like Coleman said once, the career of a young theoretical physicist consists of treating the harmonic oscillator in ever-increasing levels of abstraction. This is the same here. We are going to discuss a complicated system of harmonic oscillators. The equations of motion for that Hamiltonian are given by these expressions 13 and 14, where we have, for those that are already used to cosmological perturbation theory, have a usual Hubble radius term that is related to the expansion or contraction of the universe, a harmonic term, and due to the coupling between the perturbations, one mode is going to appear on the equation of motion of the other one. So we have system of infinite harmonic oscillators that are damped by the Hubble terms, but are also coupled. But there are still harmonic oscillators in it, where the frequencies that I wrote are related to the wave numbers or the wavelengths by this expression, and the couplings. We have a sub-Hubble and a super-Hubble couplings given by equations 15 and 16. Okay, so we have this system of equations, which are just the Einstein equations expanded for the perturbations, that we want to evolve to extract predictions for the primordial power spectrum. But here one must ask, what initial conditions are you going to use to evolve this system? Because in inflation, one usually assumes an initial vacuum state for the cosmological perturbations. In bouncing models, one also does that, but we cannot do this here directly. Why? Because the perturbations are coupled. And they are coupled even for small scales, because these orange couplings, they are proportional to the frequencies, which are proportional to the wave numbers. So even if you take very, very small scales, the perturbations are still coupled. So if we want to set a vacuum state here, one would need to generalize the notion of a vacuum state for coupled perturbations, which was the main challenge of this model that my advisor started to investigate. And the idea is that one uses a technique to set initial conditions known as the Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. This is very, very technical. I can give more details if someone is interested, but I will just give an outline. So suppose that you have a Hamiltonian tensor, so that the Hamiltonian is described by this expression. Like the Hamiltonian tensor is a matrix of the coefficients of the Hamiltonian. And the chi is just a vector in phase space. When the Hamiltonian has a block diagonal form, which is our case, which I mean that momenta are coupled to momenta and coordinates are coupled to coordinates, but there is no crossed coupling, then one can derive the eigenvalues of the Hamiltonian tensor, and using these eigenvalues, one can diagonalize the Hamiltonian. But since the Hamiltonian is time dependent, it will not stay diagonalized. A new term will appear related to this matrix M, which is in red. So you can diagonalize the Hamiltonian for initial time, but it will not stay diagonal after the evolution goes on. So, and of course, one tries to diagonalize the Hamiltonian to see if one can decouple the perturbative modes and set initial conditions. So, after performing this, one can set initial conditions on that new version of the Hamiltonian after performing this diagonalization using these A variables related to the action angle variables, where the Lij's are given in terms of the action angles by this expression, and the gamma, sigma matrix are just terms to encapsulate background quantities that do not matter here. But I'd like to focus on the result of this technique. The result is that one has a generalization of the standard WKB approximation for coupled perturbations. And these generalize the adiabatic vacuum state for coupled cosmological perturbations. And this approach can be used for n interacting fields. This is a very, very nice result because even though this was created to be applied on this model, this bouncing model, this can also be applied for inflationary models that have coupled fields, for instance. So one uses these initial conditions, which are essentially WKB initial conditions, but with coupling in terms of these very nasty variables. One sets initial conditions and evolves the perturbative equations to obtain the primordial power spectrum. This was probably the most technical part of the talk. I can go back if someone is interested, but let's go to the predictions. First, we have this set of plots. The left side is the adiabatic mode, and the right side is the entropy mode. So one sees that, as expected, using these initial conditions, the modes start oscillating a sub-Hubble phase, and then they enter into a super Hubble phase where they stop oscillating. There's an interesting feature here that while super Hubble perturbations in the expanding phase, they stay frozen, in bouncing models, they are amplified up until the bounce. So this adiabatic mode, when it enters the super Hubble regime, it is amplified. And the same happens for this other initial condition. But the entropy modes, they are not amplified when they enter into a super Hubble regime. They stay frozen. And this is a very, very nice feature because the initial conditions of the CMB that we observe, they have large adiabatic perturbative modes, but they do not have large entropy modes. So this is a nice feature of the two-fluid model that we actually were not expecting. We were expecting the entropy modes to be also amplified, but they are not. And I'll explain this a bit better. But first, I would like to point out that one can split let's say, the types of modes, the regimes of the primordial power spectrum into three phases. They are, first, there are modes that cross before this line, which are dust modes. They become super Hubble when the dust fluid is dominating. Then there is a transition period where the speed of sound is changing. The speed of sound of the adiabatic mode is changing from dust to radiation. Modes that cross during this period are like transition modes. And then there are modes that become super Hubble in this period where radiation is dominating. So each of these lines is the frequency that appears in the equations of motion. And the black line is the effective Hubble radius of the adiabatic mode. So we already know from this plot that the adiabatic power spectrum will have three regimes, one for modes that became super Hubble during dust domination, another regime for modes that become super Hubble during the transition period, and finally, a regime for modes that became super Hubble during the radiation domination period. Okay? And there's a similar interpretation here, but for the entropy mode. Same idea, but with the frequency and Hubble radius of the entropy mode. Okay. And this can be visualized by this primordial power spectrum of adiabatic perturbations. So one sees that there is an almost scaling variant regime for modes that became super Hubble during dust domination, a transition period where the amplitude of the power spectrum drops, and then the radiation type modes, the modes that became super Hubble and were amplifying the radiation domination. And we see a very interesting feature here that while the spectrum starts with a certain amplitude and does not have a red tilt, its amplitude drops here for modes that cross and become super Hubble in the transition period. And this is what generates the red tilt in this kind of bouncing models that one could not describe for single fluid models. It is a change of the sound speed for modes that are becoming super Hubble during this transition period. Okay, so that was the power spectrum for a wide range of scales. But if one sets that primordial power spectrum as an initial condition to evolve a Boltzmann integrator to derive predictions for the CMB, one sees that one can derive a best fit primordial power spectrum, which of course is very, very different from a usual power law, as in inflationary models, which is this blue curve. It's the best fit of the two fluid model. But one notices an interesting feature. When one considers an average spectral index of this blue curve for the NS, the spectral index, one sees that on average, the spectral index of the two fluid model, which is given by this value, is very close to the 0.96, which is consistent with CMB observations and is the prediction of inflation, which is this red curve. So red curve is inflation, and the green curve is the average of the blue curve, which is the bouncing model prediction. So even without inflation and an inflaton, we were able to derive a red tilt for the primordial power spectrum, which on average recovers the value that we already knew from inflation, which is very, very interesting. This is, let's say, an achievement for bouncing models, because most of the bouncing models up until this two fluid model were not able to describe this red tilt. So it's a very nice result in this sense. But in order to really compare the predictions of inflation and the bouncing models, one needs to go further. Okay, so just to put some context, let's say, this is a model-independent reconstruction of the primordial power spectrum of the CMB using Planck data alone. So if one takes a look at this feature, let me take some water also. One notices that, of course, a power law primordial spectrum is consistent with the Planck data. It would be here. But the Planck data does not exclude a spectrum that has an almost scaling invariant phase and then has a drop in the end. It is still consistent with this reproduction, which is exactly the case of the primordial power spectrum that we derived using the two fluid bouncing model. So this motivates that this model could, in principle, describe the CMB data. And let me see something. Yeah, I was going to say something, but the slide is more close to the end. I'll go back to this idea later. Anyway, so I would like to compare the spectrum of the entropy modes to the adiabatic modes. To do so, I'll discuss the super Hubble solution of the system of perturbative equations. So, if we consider the so-called super Hubble limit, where the wavelength is very, very large, the system of equations that I showed, these are the Hamilton equations, they simplify quite a lot. The momenta are constants in this super Hubble order, and the coordinate modes, the zeta and the s, they evolve from this system of equations. So one can integrate this system, and one can obtain an analytical solution for this regime for modes that have very, very large wavelengths. So what one sees is that the masses of each mode are the factors that are going to dominate its dynamics on the super Hubble regime. In this case, the mass of the adiabatic mode is an always decreasing quantity, while the mass of the entropy mode is an always increasing quantity. So while the adiabatic mode will be amplified by this integral here, its amplitude will grow, the entropy mode will not grow because its mass is always growing, so this integral will saturate. This is very, very important because this guarantees that we can focus only on the adiabatic mode to derive the predictions of a primordial power spectrum. The entropy modes are very, very small. And this was obtained without any fine-tuning, which is a very, very nice feature. Okay. So if one plots the adiabatic power spectrum and the entropy power spectrum, This caption is very, very bad. I need to correct it later. But one sees that they differ by quite some orders of magnitude. In this case, more than 60 orders of magnitude. So the entropy modes are much, much smaller than the adiabatic ones, which is a nice feature of them. Okay, so to really compare and evolve the initial conditions, we use the NumCosmo library, which is a cosmological library that we have been developing here at Londrina, at our university. And in particular, it has a field equation solver and a Markov chain Monte Carlo method, both developed on C language to become faster, that we can use to evolve that system and obtain the best fit parameters using the MCMC technique with Planck data. And all the graphs and analysis are going to be available on example Python notebooks that we are going to upload in the NumCosmo GitHub when we publish this work. Okay? So we are going to evolve the system of equations and use the Markov chain Monte Carlo technique to extract the best fit parameters and compare the prediction of the models. And one finds a very, very nice feature. No, I need to go back here to go back to that idea that I told before. Here. So the model independent reconstruction is still consistent with any spectrum that has an scaling invariant phase and then decreases, like I told before. But the most important point is that it is difficult to compare two spectra that have different functional forms. The prediction of inflation, the red curve, is very, very different from our prediction, the blue curve. We just did this average curve to make a simple qualitative description. But in the end, to compare how each model describes the data from the CMB, one needs to really evolve this model using the MCMC technique and Bayesian analysis to compare how well each model describes the data. And this is what we did using the solvers and the algorithms of NumCosmo. And when we perform this MCMC analysis, and the slide's not going, yes. When one performs this analysis and compares the best fit parameters of each model, one sees a very, very nice feature of the two-fluid model. Here is the H0, the Hubble parameter today, that is derived from the MCMC technique applied to these models from Planck data. And one notices that the prediction of inflation, which is the usual one, it has a peak here on 6.7 with a confidence region up until 69, something like that. But the prediction for the Hubble constant from the two-fluid model is larger than the 6.7 from inflation. It is more close to 70, in fact, with a confidence interval. So one notices that by using this bouncy model, which was constructed to eliminate the primordial singularity, one was able to naturally increase the value of the Hubble constant using data from the CMB alone, which was quite an unexpected feature. So this alleviates a lot the Hubble tension. And there is also a similar feature for the sigma A tension for this parameter, but it's a reversed behavior. The value predicted by the two-fluid model is a bit smaller than the one predicted for inflation. So this model was able to derive the primordial power spectrum of the CMB, which is not a power law. It is consistent with CMB data that we have, and it also alleviated the Hubble tension, which is a very, very interesting feature. When we noticed this, we decided to perform analysis using also other data sets. So we did the same analysis. The quality is very, very bad here, but the data that we used was Planck 2018, the Schulz data, Pantheon data, and also Planck polarization data. We were interested to see if adding this data, combining data from the late universe, would give a preference for the two-fluid model versus inflation. And what we obtained thus far is that the Hubble constant is consistently derived to be around 70, 71. It is closer to the values that we derive using just supernovae data, using lambda CDM. But the interesting point is that when we compare the two models using the Bayesian evidence, the two-Fourier model, it loses in the Bayesian evidence when we include only Planck data, just data from the primordial universe, but it is able to compete against inflation when we add supernovae or large-scale structure data, which is very nice, very interesting feature. But we're still performing this Bayesian analysis and we have not concluded it yet. So, conclusions. I decided to list the conclusions in the direction from more general to more specific. So if you do not agree with something, we can stop or whatever, whenever you like. So, conclusions. First, the model independent ones. In order to evolve and quantize the system, we applied a generalization of the WKB approximation and a vacuum state definition for adiabatic interacting system in the expanding space, which is the Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. Techniques to quantize these kinds of systems are very scarce. To my knowledge, this was one of the first works to really apply this technique to an actual cosmological model. And this is totally unrelated to bounces. So this can be used also on inflation. So it's a very nice result. And a two-fluid matter bounce leads to a red tilted spectrum with very small isocurvature perturbations or entropy perturbations. And this is quite independent of the bouncing mechanism. Okay, I'll save this for later. This is quite independent of the bouncing mechanism. In what sense? I described a bounce which was implemented using the Wheeler-DeWitt equation of canonical quantum gravity. But provided that the bounce occurs fast enough, the mechanism that generates the bounce only affects the amplitude of the primordial power spectrum. So the fact that the spectrum has a red tilt and has very small entropy perturbations does not depend on the bounce mechanism. It only depends on the dynamics of the contracting phase. It does not depend on Wheeler-DeWitt equation or for instance, one could also consider bounces in loop quantum cosmology, and the results would be very similar, which we're interested to investigate in the future. And since we're considering a bouncing model, there is no Transplanckian problem nor need of a rewriting period, since we're considering a bounce. There are no Transplanckian frequency problem because the scale factor has a minimum, there are no Transplanckian modes, and the universe was not super cold like in inflation, so there is no need for rewriting. And there was also no use of exotic matter to derive the predictions, like the inflaton, which is any yet unobserved scalar field. So, to the more model-dependent conclusions, the primordial singularity may be removed using canonical quantum gravity with the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation applied to wave functions that satisfy the DeWitt equation. And this use of the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation eliminates the quantum to classical transition problem, because in this setting, the scale factor follows a deterministic trajectory, so this quantum to classical transition problem does not occur. Of course, this demands that one assumes both the Wheeler-DeWitt equation and the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation of quantum mechanics, so it's model dependent. And the to be calculated temperature spectrum, the to be calculated was before, it is already calculated. But the CMB temperature spectrum provides constraints for canonical quantum gravity and the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which is very nice because, like I said, using cosmological data from the CMB, we are able to constrain models of quantum gravity that we would take quite some time to have access to the energy scale zero on Earth, which is very nice, but this also demands that one assume this quantum gravitational model to implement the bounce, so it is model dependent. So these are our results. These will all be available on the work Two-Fluid Bouncing Cosmology, Quantum Background and Perturbations that I, my advisor, and our collaborators are writing. Future work. one could use other observables to constrain the model, like primordial black holes, the Silk damping effects or spectral distortions, and one can also calculate the spectrum of tensor perturbations or primordial gravitational waves for the future. And of course, one can also add more large-scale structure data from the late universe to further constrain this model in the future. So, acknowledgements, I'd like to thank UEL and the Grupo de Cosmologia da UEL for all the discussions and etc. Pós-graduação em Física da UEL for the scholarship, and also CAPES for the scholarship. These are my references, and thank you all.
Thank you, Luis. Very, very interesting seminar. Very, very interesting work. I'm also interested because of your results. There are some questions from the audience.
I have one.
Come on.
Okay.
First, nice presentation, man. Thank you. Very nice. Actually, it's about a work. I don't know. It's about the contraction phase. There is a work from Zaldarriaga, Senatori, and Daniel Bauman, where they prove that at least for all epkerotic type of contractions, you have the strong coupling problem. And you cannot avoid this if you want a scale invariant spectrum. So, did you have this here? How did you avoid this? If you look at
Uh,
into it?
That's a very nice question, very nice point, because you see, these problems, these no-go results, let's say, they're typical of classical bounces that use this kind of scalar fields like equiperotic models. So they are typical of classical bounces dominated by scalar fields. There's a review by Patrick Peter where he discusses this. So that's why people have turned to quantum bounces, because in quantum bounces we do not have the same problem, because the bounce is quantum and they are not driven by scalar fields. And there's also the fact that, like you said, to derive any scaling invariant primordial power spectrum, one falls into these kinds of setting. But like I presented, our model, it gives a primordial power spectrum that is not a scaling invariant spectrum. It has a different
Okay.
functional form, but is also consistent with data.
Okay.
Okay, so there are these two points, let's say.
But okay, I think I get it. Just to clarify better for me. For example, if I remind this work of Bauman, they argue some things like the problem with the contraction is that the density will grow in the phase of contraction. They say this is something like general. I don't remember quite well because I think the density goes over the scale factor and the scale factor is going to zero and blah blah blah. But the point that they rise is that about the perturbations, the reliability of the cosmological perturbations, because if you have any strong, I don't know, if something is growing intensely, and then you lost the control over perturbation parameters. If you perturb your theory, your perturbation will be much lower. Then it's not reliable. So you uh, so you don't have this problem here at all.
No,
Did you?
no. I don't know the details of the results that they obtained, but I can tell you the following. The
Okay.
amplitude of the curvature perturbations here, you can check that it is very, very small, like the usual order of the CMB perturbations. Okay?
But in the contraction phase also.
Yes. This is the
Okay.
maximum. In the contracting phase, it is even smaller.
Okay.
But
Good.
one thing that is typical that one sees in bounce literature is that this is a funny result, by the way. You know the gauges that we have in cosmological perturbation theory? One cannot use the Newtonian gauge in the contracting phase because there is a quantity, the phi, the small phi, that grows and it looks like the perturbation theory does not hold. But it's not the perturbation theory that does not hold, it's the Newtonian gauge. So we needed to perform calculations in the flat slicing gauge in this setting. So it's one of the things that can occur. But in this model, I guarantee that the linear perturbation theory holds. It's very, very small and contraction phase, it's all good. Okay?
Okay, very good. Very nice, man. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Any other question from the audience? I have a question for using this the same plot. It's very nice, but I don't see if I don't understand why the blue curve is the power spectrum of the perturbations using your Wheeler-DeWitt equation and so on. And you mentioned that, this is not so similar, that power spectrum which delivers the perturbations in the usual case. But you present in the green curve a power spectrum using some mean or some expected value of the scalar index. I don't see why you can, or what is the argument behind this. Could you expand this idea?
The argument? It goes as follows. We define this local spectral index by the logarithmic derivative of the spectrum. Okay? So after defining this, we take an average over the CMB scales. And when we take the average for the best fit primordial power spectrum of the bouncing model, we obtain this value, which is very close to the inflationary one. But we only did this calculation to give, let's say, a qualitative motivation that, the two models, they look very, very different, but if you take an average of sorts, then you would recover a similar prediction. It's just a motivation, because in the end, to really compare, one needs to run the full MCMC and etc. But this was more like to not, let's say, frighten people, like, oh, the spectrum is not a power law, etc. And like, no, chill down, man. It's not a power law, but maybe it can work. That's the idea.
Perfect. And as you mentioned, the full comparison is using this cosmological parameter obtaining the cosmological parameters, as you show it in the plots.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the MCMC with the full computation. And by the way, there's also a fact that the blue curve, our prediction is only numerical, so these make things difficult.
Yeah. I imagine that in the deep of this plot there are a lot of points which are fitted. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. No functional form.
Yeah. Okay. There are more questions? If not, let's thank again Luis Felipe for this excellent seminar. Thank you all for staying here until the end. And sooner will be available this seminar in YouTube. Please like and subscribe in Cosmolatam YouTube channel. Luis, could you give me the links for Num Cosmo, the GitHub that you present, to put it in the video? And that's it. We are finished. Thank you all who stay here, and see you on October. Give me a second. October 10th. We have seminars for this date. So stay tuned and see you all on this date. Thank you.
Bye. See you.